Okay. So in this case, working with this baseball example, the first thing that they wanted to learn from was the get teams played for this API. And so to do that, this is all JSON based. And if we look at this one right here, this will get your player teams and your player ID. Matter of fact, we'll just copy this string. Let's come down to here. And this will be the URL, so to speak. We'll get a little more detail in that. Notice it has placeholders. So you have season and you have player ID. We're going to fill that in here shortly as we set those variables, whether we get those or we pass them in. So like season, we could just hard code that for now. We could say something like season equals 2023. I don't know, something older so that it could go in there. Now, sometimes they'll want that as a string or an integer. So you'll have to come back here and check your documentation and notice season needs to be a string. So this would not work. We would need to put it in single quotes in order for it to become a string, right? Okay. And then player ID, we would have to plug in some player ID. Now, obviously, we don't know what player is what, so we would need to go chase down the player data, aka search for player details, to get that player ID out and then plug that into teams play for. So for now, if we just hard code this one and figure out who that is in a minute, player ID, and we'll do single quotes around that string as well. Make sure it wants a string, good. And then this is the GET request that we need to pull. So we're gonna take that whole string and plug it in here. Now notice that one has those hard-coded. We're gonna go back and plug those variables in. So this would be something like where we would do an F string on this. So we would say something like URL equals, and then we would have our F statement. If you guys remember F statements from 360, we would do that. In this case, we'd probably want to use a double quote because we have single quotes in here kind of thing.
So is that, since I didn't take 360s, that F statement, is that just formatting it?
It is. That's called a formatted string. And so what that allows you to do is dump in variables directly into the string so that that string ends up being that at the end.
So I remember that now.
Okay.
So like here, instead of us having those hard-coded numbers in there, we would actually dump in like player ID in brackets, and that pulls it from our Python file in order to dump into that string. So it'll pull these two variables, put them in here. And if at the very least, we just did this for now, just so you can see what we're doing. Let's do code, comment out, and we'll comment this old one out here at the top. Let's just do a print URL. We run it. We can see that it dumped in those numbers, 2023, and it dumped in the player ID 2016. Cool. So that's a good check to get started with this one. And then let's go back up to the top and look at the example request. And we can make sure that we have the formatting for everything it's actually looking for. So this would be request. We're looking for the structure. Okay. And the path. So we would write something fancier if we wanted to do that. But for now, this will work. And so it doesn't look like we need to have an API key or anything fancy on that side. So let's just run that and see what happens. So we'll still have to set that up in like a request type fashion with the context headers of application JSON, and then we'll get a result that looks something like this out of it. In our case, we're specifically doing player teams, right? This one. So we should get all the teams that they played for. Perfect.
Right.
Okay. So now let's come back here, and instead of printing this, we'll go ahead and keep this option here. There is no payload that we're delivering. We do need to set the headers, which I'm going to just undo this whole thing here real quick. And we'll keep the pieces we need.
Okay, Jason, this may be a silly question, but when you commented all those lines at once, is that something specific to PyCharm?
That is for you being able to do it real quick like that. The other way of
Uh-huh.
doing that is doing three quotes like that, and then three quotes down here like that, and that will comment out that entire chunk.
Okay.
That's another way of doing it. Otherwise, the way PyCharm does it there is it does a line comment using the hashtag, and it's just good for that one line. But when you do it this way, take that back out like this and go to code and comment with a line comment, you could do that. In theory, you should be able to have that option for doing a block comment there too, which is what the other one is.
Okay.
It's what it just gets Python to ignore the code so that it's just more of a comment and it'll ignore all those other pieces in there then.
Yeah, I'm used to comments from like Linux configuration files, doing it with a hashtag.
Yep.
But I didn't know there was a way to like do a whole block of at once.
Yeah. So if I wanted all this gone and I was just doing regular code, I could just basically do double quotes and then three double quotes. And now all that's commented out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Single codes also work, Jason.
What's that?
Single code.
Yeah, you could do single quotes, I believe. Nope, those aren't single quotes. Sorry. And dealing with Markdown, which is the other ones like that. So the only reason you may not want to do this is if it collides with other stuff. So that's the reason I typically use double quotes. But Python's pretty forgiving in that regard. Okay, so we want to make sure we get a response, which means we are going to post, right? And that's what you're going to see here, that this is actually a get, right? So we are going to get a get from there, not a post. We may have to change that here, but that looks right. So a get URL, we need our params, data headers, and in this case, we just need our data, which is nothing. We're not sending any data into it. We just have our headers, and our headers need to be set to the content type of JSON, right? That's what we see right here. So that looks good. We got our get, and then the result of that is going to be what comes back as our response.json. We're going to save that as the variable data, and then we can do whatever we want with data. So for now, we're just going to pretty print data, and it should return something back like what we see over here on the right. Right? So it would be a dictionary for us, but because it's JSON, it's in the JSON format. We're already translating that with this JSON string here. So let's see what happens. And what do we get here? Decode string, did not like the JSON. Okay. Should have been fine. URL and headers should be right. Can't think of anything else we need to send. See if it's already encoded as JSON. That's why. So let's do just response here. Let's see what that gives us. Or if we're not found. So at least we're there, we're just not found. And so let's go back to that example because that person probably didn't play in 2023. So that would be a thing that you would code for here, where you get this response 404. we would actually do a check for that. So we could do that right here and say if response dot, sometimes they don't give us a status code. There we go. Equals 404, print not found. That'll work. So let's try that. And there we go.
So
We
the,
not found.
so the double equals, is that like the not true, not equal? Is that what that stands for?
That one means equal is what that. So in Python, double equals is equal. Equal exclamation is not equal to, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And for that, if you need some of that, since you don't have the 360 stuff, use the automate the boring stuff.
Yep. I started reading that and watching some of your old videos to try to get, I mean, I did some reading in the summer to try to get caught up, and then my summer classes prevented that.
I did. I thought I sent you stuff that, and I know your name sounded familiar when I was going through everything.
Right.
So we could use something just like this, where if it's a 404, we could say not found. And in this case, we could probably assume that's the player. So we could say even better is player not found at that date provided. And then if we wanted to, we could give us additional data here, which would be print something like season is season and print player ID is player ID. And so what that'll do is just give us a little bit of debug information. Otherwise, we could say else, go ahead and pretty print our response back. And again, we don't need to convert this one to JSON because it's a JSON API. It's always going to be JSON. And so here we get better error messaging when we're on this side. Cool. So what we can do now is change this back to, I think it was 2012, right?
I think it was 2014.
You're right, 2014. So 2014. And it didn't like that player during that season either.
And that may be just a random number for the player ID too.
I assumed it would have worked because this is how they pulled out their info over here.
Right.
So to test that, just to go over, since they use that as their example here, let's go this way. URL equals that in general. And we could comment out this line and use that line. Oh, it came up with double quote. Yeah, evidently that's still no longer valid. Okay, well, that's fine. So what we realize here is that we need to go figure out a player ID and then hopefully a valid season, right? Before we can actually build your request you wanted. So if we go back to the site, and in this case, we would have to do something like search for players, right? And that's going to take a string. And then from there, we could search for active players in for that. So we have a switch available to see if they're active or not. And then in the name part, we could pass in some kind of name to pay in there. So we could steal this part here. Actually, we'll steal this example over here. It's a little easier that way. And
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So when we're doing the GET request, is this going into some database to pull the record?
Yes. Yeah, it's going to a database, and then what they've done is they have an API interface on their side, which is commonly called like a REST interface, where you're sending information up or retrieving information back. Sometimes that requires authentication, sometimes it doesn't. You can actually build your own in Python with a program called Fast API. But the idea is it will return it in some way. And generally, it's going to return in JSON. And that's what this content type is describing. So that in JSON, we can very easily convert it over to Python because it's essentially a dictionary at that point. Does that answer what you were looking for, man? Somebody? Sorry, I didn't see whose name that was. It didn't pop up here. Okay. So there's a couple things. One, we already have this function to go look up this player, right? And we don't necessarily need to do that, or we don't need to lose that. So just like you guys did in Python, we can go ahead and create a mini function here to make this work. So we could say def, and we could say something like get player team. And it's going to look exactly like that. Thank you, autocorrect. Right? So cool. It generated it on the fly. Essentially, it's going to take our string up here, plug it up here. We now have this. So at any time we want to test this get player data, all we have to do is pass in these two variables, in which case we could do something like get player team, that, and it would automatically go call that, right? So we need to have another function up here that goes and does this other one we looked at. So that would look something like def, and we're going to say get player, or what was it actually? It was called search player name, right? Something like that. Search player. Is that the tag? Search player all. Close enough. Okay. So we'll do this, and we want to search for a name, and then we also could get a switch from the user that would say something like active. Okay. And we could set the default to that to be active only to true. So by default, unless we tell them that it's not, then it will do that by default. So now we'll come back here to your, by the way, this was a great API. This is exactly what I was hoping for today. So you get a thumbs up and a kudos. We need to grab this string, right? So this active switch we need to be able to set. And this is our overall URL. So let's take it. And we're going to plug that in here. Like that. And then instead of this switch here, we're going to set that. And this will be our variable of active only. And then this one here will be the player name. There you go. We maintain our headers. That all looks good. Now, because we're repeating this headers thing, just like you guys did in 360, we know that we should probably set that as a what? Anybody know?
Global variable.
Yep, exactly. So because we're reusing it, essentially the same thing every time, we could just set it up here as a global variable. Then we don't have to set it at the local side. It will just pull from the global if it doesn't find anything defined on the local side. So great. We got that. We are passing in these two variables here, and then we're essentially going to have this same setup here where we respond it back. So that looks good, except again, we're not going to do a JSON because it's already in JSON format. So we've defined that side. And then the other thing we might want to say is for now, let's say it's active only, right? So we're going to say active only is true. And then do you have a name of a person for now?
I don't know. Give me a second to think on that. If we change the year, then we could do somebody like Freddie Freeman.
So in this case, the year doesn't matter, right? Because we're either active or not active.
Oh, active or not active? Yeah, just use Freddie Freeman.
Okay. So player name. I assume that's this way.
It's IE.
Of course. That's what I get for assuming. Something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we want to do this one first, in which case we'll do our search player. We'll plug in those variables and get it back. And then here, we want to store that. And when we go to call this, we'll do this as our, we'll call it player for now. And then notice up here, we're just returning responses, right? So we need to actually print it out. We could do something like print player for the time being. And what do we get? We get a 404 because the URL is not defined. Why is URL not defined?
Question, Jason. What if the player name is stored differently? They're expecting, let's say, how about Freddy, comma Freeman, or Freeman, comma Freddy, some other format.
So
Then
in here, all they're looking for is a string to search for. In other words, they're not requiring it be in any specific step. They're doing it almost like a search. In other words, give us the most amount of information you can.
okay.
Some, yes, will need it to be very specific, in which case, what you would have to do is then set the restrictions on the incoming data. You would want to validate whatever the user typed in. In this case, we're hard coding this stuff, right? But we could build a little script that'll say, give me a player name, give me active own, that kind of stuff. And then we would have to validate whether or not that stuff was fitting our API requirements. That's
You
usually
also use regex, right?
Yeah, you could use regex. If they're using regex on this side, you could do that. So for example, if you use Sapindis here, right, instead of Johannes, it will need to respond with a percent character in your search term. Without it, you'll end up seeing a return 500. So it might be better that we add that percent 25 on there just to see if
Like a wildcard type of thing. Is it a
it's kind of,
wildcard?
yeah, it's saying it wants a single search term in there is what it said. If you're using a single search term. So in our case, we're actually not, right? We're using a space in there. So
Yeah.
we could do that. Let's try straight Freeman with that percent 25 and see what happens. Still getting 404s. And our active is true. Well, let's see if I can use their example here. All right, is this API still valid?
How do you verify that if the API is still valid or
Well,
not?
that's just it. You basically try it, and in this case,
Uh,
I don't know that this is actually still existing, to be honest. It's weird because the documentation's here, right? I guess we could do this. Yeah, I would say this API is down. All of that just to show that the API is down.
Yay.
because
But
the first thing you have to check is whether the API is valid and
you
fully
got
functional
right. So
before
a
you
lot
start coding.
this API endpoint right there tells you that the service is down. So a lot of times they'll give you these samples over here if it's a good API documented. And you could just copy, if it's a GET, you just copy and paste that up here in an address bar and hit enter. You should get all that information down. So in this case, that's no longer valid.
So when you say like when you say that we'll get all that information, are you saying that if I put that in the navigation bar, it's going to list for the player?
It would dump this. So that's what they're showing you here is if you do a request on this, you should get this come back on the screen.
I got you.
And if you're not, then there's a problem, obviously, with the service at that point.
Okay.
How do you check the post? I know this is for the GET.
So a post, you would actually have to check on this side. The other one you could do is there's a tool out here called Postman, which is a great thing if you're working with APIs and such. You can just download it there. I believe you get the free version, so that, or even on the web, right? So on the web version, probably have to sign up. Well, why don't we just do it real quick?
I also found a food API. They've been set up for an API key, but it emails it to you immediately.
Nice. There was an API tool available in PyCharm, but I don't remember what it was. This works really well. Postman is like super simple way of doing stuff. Come on here. So yes, that's my name. I am an educator, sure. And then of course they want you to pay for it. So continue with free plan. Let's try that. That works good. Sure, that all looks good. Let's get started. Okay, here's the tool. So if you work with this tool, you can kind of figure out a new one to do it. So in this case, we're going to use HTTP, and then you can do a get or a post. And if you paste that data, whatever link is, then in the query terms, you can go in and adjust these here on the fly and hit send, and it would respond down here with whatever that result would be. Obviously, this one's
Since
broken.
it's not broken, it's broken. If it's
Right. So this is a good way to go play with stuff in the beginning, and then you could start Python it down here, building it into functions and stuff like that. But Postman is a really good tool for doing that kind of stuff, and it is free. You can use this stuff. If you were doing a get in this case, obviously this stuff up here would change in terms of headers and what you need to send, but that way you could build it out. Now, if you go to Rapid API, the one we were looking at yesterday, Postman is essentially built into their product here. So like say this leaks one, right? They're telling you, here's your key, here's your whatever. You could copy and paste in your actual key here to be able to do an example response and test on this side. So there again, if you don't want to chase down and try to find a bunch of free ones, you basically come here, you put your card in that doesn't get charged kind of thing, and then you could have access to all these, right? Just find the ones that are $0 and away you go. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but that's an option.
I really need to review the last week's video and this one.
Yeah. And if you go back and watch the ones that were out here for 601 in the past, there is several out there dealing with APIs. So if you guys need examples or wanted some boilerplate code, there's tons of that out there. But in long story, this would have worked, right? So we would have been able to get the player, which eventually would have resulted in a player ID. And then we could make this call down here to actually go get the team with that ID in the season that we chose.
Hey, Jason, I just dropped one link in the chat. It's an example of an API from FDA.
Okay.
See if you can try that one.
Okay. Yep. That one pulls back for that particular one. So what you could do, let's see here. So about, that looks good. Returns JSON by default. So we're good there. Notice how this one is always telling you that you get a JSON object that has two sections in it. You always have the metadata and you always have the result itself, which we saw just on that page, right? So you would want to write functions that would parse this, that on the metadata, we could see what our total limit is, et cetera, the licensing, all like that. And then you could get your results chunk, which is really probably what you're after. Note that this looks like a list of dictionaries underneath. So you'll end up needing to parse that data out to get what you're looking for. So for here, let's look at the food one just because we talked about food earlier. Or better, here we got the try API, FDA fields, okay. Oh, there you go. So it does want you to use an authentication.
Yeah.
And in this case, the way it works is you bury that in the URL that you're trying to go after. Or you could use like base 65 encryption if you're doing it that way. This is the easier way to do it, depending on where you're going. So if we get an API key, let's see if this works.
I mean, it's pretty instantaneous. At least for the FDA or the one I looked at.
Yeah, as long as it lets me trash the URL key, which I don't see how that works. So before I go further, I got to figure out how to get rid of the API key. Does anybody see that? Is there any login or anything you get?
No, it just emails it to your It just emails it to you.
Okay, so here's another way to do this. And this is what I want you guys to do when you guys use any API keys that require. So in other words, you don't want to post your API key to GitHub, right? If I plug it in here and I say my API key is blah, 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 right? And I'll tell you how to get around it here in a second. So API key is something, and I submit this to GitHub. GitHub will actually scrape your guys' post and then ban you from whatever service you're on. Sometimes. Sometimes other people like Rapid API is really good at that, right? If I submit something with my API, all of a sudden my API key will just cease to work, which is good because you don't want people stealing your key and then racking up a bunch of costs on there. To get around that, there's a couple ways that you can pull that API key in. You could come over here and create a new file, Python, and we could say something like creds. And I would have that. I would not add this file to my repo. And that is where I would put my API key information like this. And then over here, my main one, I would say something like from creds import API key. Then over here, it will just store that. And then in your README file, you would say in the creds file, put your API key in. Does that all make sense? And so you would have to tell them to create this creds file because it won't exist because you didn't commit it to your project.
So the reason I put something in the chat because I wanted to ask about this, like the USDA, like I think the FDA does it too. You can create there's a demo key.
Okay.
In the chat, I posted a link to because I was looking at I wanted to look up flour, but it says that there's a demo key. It has limits and whatnot, but
right.
I was trying to figure out if, for example, do services often offer a demo key or whatever?
Some will, and usually they want it tied back to somebody.
Okay.
This demo key is for somebody doing exactly what I'm doing, which is recording a video and here's what you get kind of thing. The other thing is it's okay to do this kind of stuff. Like if I show you a key, if it allows me to apply for a new key, because then I would just discontinue because this record on YouTube, I would just discontinue and go. So in my case, I need to do something like this with the key that they just sent me. So stand by.
It offers with no API key, you can do 240 requests a minute.
There you go. So you could demo that. We'll use the key here as long as I can remember not to show it on the screen. Okay. So I have that creds file. I have that API key in there. And we would just plug that into the URL. So what I'm going to do is come back to what you asked me here. We got that, construct a query. Here's your query syntax, how you're going to send stuff in the search. Here's what the actual thing is going to be, that kind of thing. So in this case, when we do our search and we need to plug that in, there's advanced syntax. It looks like some wildcard searching you can do. Okay, cool. You could also download the straight data. There's all the API fields so that you could chase some of that piece out. What that would be beneficial for is if you wanted to write extra code for Python in this case that validated some of the code that you were trying to do, that would work there too. So in our case, authentication, you're going to want something like this, right? And so we'll start off a URL for that. This. Oh, by the way, you would take this creds, right click on it, go to your Git and add to Git ignore. And that would make sure that you never accidentally commit your creds file. You would just add it down here at the bottom of your Git ignore. You can either do this manually by typing it in, or if you right click, go to Git, and then you will have an option here for add to Git ignore, which is what I just did. It'll dump it down here at the bottom. You'll also notice that'll go to kind of an orange, and that means that it won't actually ever get committed.
Okay.
So Jason, do we need to do that both ways, where we add it to the Git ignore and tell it not to add it to Git when we first create it?
It's a good safety habit or good practice to do that, so that if you ever came in here and accidentally tried to add it, it still wouldn't do it because your Git ignore would overwrite that.
Okay.
So, and you'll always notice if I come to commit, notice how the other one doesn't even show up here anymore
Gotcha.
because it's in get ignore. If I take this out and come off and come back, usually there it goes. It pops up as an available option here where you could check it and add it. But as long as it's in here, it won't do that. Matter of fact, this should refresh and pull it back out of there as an option. Like that. So good safety. Anything you don't want going to GitHub, you put in your get ignore. Now you may have like for example, a folder of images or a folder of extra data that you don't really want that going to GitHub, then you could just add it to your get ignore. Like local data that you pulled down that you're just trying to experimenting with, kind of like we did yesterday when we shoved a bunch of stuff in this data file, you may choose to not submit the data file because realistically, you shouldn't be dumping a bunch of data in a Python file going up to GitHub, right? You want them to pull from whatever API service that you're pulling from. All right, so let's try yours now that we have this in here. We got this. Let's go ahead and just create a URL for the time being. Nope, that's creds.
Oh, that's not.
That should have copied here. Okay, that's a starter. And where this says your API key here, we're obviously just going to do an F statement. Take out this chunk, do it in parentheses, and that is our API key. There we go.
Because the F statement is what that F statement allows it to fill it in, right?
Yeah, F statement allows you to format this in the structure you want, including dumping in variables, right?
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yep.
I know one of you asked about that, but my brain was like, F statements.
All good. So like you said, with no API key, we could technically do this per IP address. Otherwise, with one, we can do quite a bit more requests. So we could do it either way here, obviously, like what you were just trying to tell me when I was throwing the API key in. So here, how to use the API for, what was this one? Food. This is our base point. Here, we're going to add in our search. We need to give the field term, whatever it is, and then the limit that we want to pull back on some of that. And then if we look at some example queries, they have one here. So we could do something like this one, right? Which is limiting to one record and pulling all the records between January 01 to 2020 or 2004, 2018. So first start, right? Run query, make sure it pulls something back. Yep, that looks good. Let's try it in the browser. Yep, that looks good. You could even test it in Postman here. If we plug in this side and do a send, yep, we got JSON down here. And then to test it in Python, we'll just dump that one in here to test. And we will ignore, we still got to do this stuff. So let's copy that out. Let's get rid of that. Headers, response, and we're not going to return response. In this case, we're just going to print. Apologize if I'm losing you, bouncing between different projects here, but hopefully that'll clean stuff up. All right, run. Yay, we got a 200 in the response, right? So that was a get, and we should have got that as JSON data, which we did get there. Let's do response dot, see if that actually does it. There it goes. So in this case, we did need the JSON to come back, even though, because it's not by default coming in that direction. So this looks good. We got our metadata coming out. Again, if we want to make that look nice and pretty so we can understand what it says, let's do some pretty print. There we go. So disclaimer, this all looks good. Terms, we got back one. Last update of this was not that long ago, so this looks good. And we got our results on this address for whatever we're doing here. I don't know what the search even was. Oh, I got too many of these tabs open. Give me a second. We'll leave that one. Not that one. This one. And that's looking for an enforcement report, evidently. So, okay. let's see, this is kind of an interactive chart that you could use to pull the API, download the data set. That's if we wanted to crunch it all ourselves. This is sometimes helpful when you guys are working through some of your assignments, where I tell you have to go find an API of your choice to pull data out of. You could just download the whole thing locally, play with the data, and then use the API to actually make the requests, right? It's just faster. That way you don't have to have internet, you're not pulling out a bunch of stuff, that kind of thing. Let's see, so we need the actual endpoints. Where is it gonna give us the endpoints for the food? Searchable fields, address, product code, status, okay. So these are the kind of fields I guess we could pull back out of. Does anybody see any of this data? Who sent me this one? Was this you? Who was this?
No, that was me. I did.
Okay, what was it you were wanting to pull out of here?
Randomly, just I chose this one. I wasn't very particular on what I'm trying to.
So let's see if there's any endpoints we can pull. So this is just pulling reports, it looks like.
Yeah.
That's all right. Well, let's look at this output here and let's see if we can get a better idea of what's going on. So we have an address. Tell you what, let's just return the first result out of there. So let's do 0. Nope, that ain't gonna work. What do we need to do to get that first result out of there? This is the overall result, right? So let's just call this response.json is gonna be our data. So let's do data equals response.json. What do we need to do to get into the results to start? Can anybody tell by
bracket 0?
Yep. So in this case, we need to grab results first, and then we can do 0 to get the first result out of this list. And we know it's a list by this designation here, right? So this would show up like this, and then for that little one, we could pretty print that. Get an idea of what that looks like. Okay, well, that gives us one dictionary with all the data inside of it. And then from there, if we wanted to get that, we could actually set that to something else if we chose to do so. So we could just say result 1, that, right? And this is going to be all the report data. In this case, we could pull the actual report data, which is just number, or that's a date rather. You could do like the reason for recall. So let's do that. And we could just print result 1. And there we go. We can get that data out. And so you could actually, instead of call this, just say recall. We could force this out, but the idea is that we can organize this in a way that we would want it to come up and be presented however we're going to present it in the future.
And you're putting that reason for recall because it's in the first result.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sub-defining first result is 0, then within that result, you want that particular piece of data.
You got it. So you could take this part off and you would get the entire result that came back, which would look like this. Right, of all the different things, and then we just need to pull the header out of whatever result we want at that point.
So it's just further defining it.
Yeah, exactly. The goal is to kind of weed it down here so you can set your variable names with something meaningful. So we could say result address 1, and we could get back that. And then in this case, we would store this as address. And then when you're building out your nice little printed out format structure or whatever, you could print it as address.
You might want to print just the address and the reason why.
Exactly.
It's there.
Yep.
You don't need all that.
Yeah, you may not need all this data as to why this whole thing's going on.
Like initial firm notification might be useless to you, but what it is and how many cases. Like if you're just trying to build out like a quick little notification or something.
Yep. And because you're going to get all this information in here, this kind of goes back to object-oriented programming. You could take this result of a dictionary and turn it into an object, in which case then I could do simple things like result dot address 1 pulls back the address right there as a variable. Like it's already a print statement formatted the way you want it, that kind of thing. So you would set that up as a class up here at the top. You could say class result, right? And you would end up passing in the dictionary, and then you would tell it to parse that dictionary and set it to self dot whatever. So self dot event ID equals, and then we could say, I don't know, data up here is what we're passing in as the dictionary. We would say data event ID. And then from there on out, when I have this instance of a result, I just say result.event ID and it pulls it back for me.
That's right. I remember that.
That's where you start to get into the OOP side of things. So as you have all this data and you're always going to get these variables back, I would build an object because then it's much easier to play with. You don't have to set individual variables down here. It will auto consume it and make it available.
I'll have to review that object stuff, but that's on the old videos, right?
Yep.
That one person who didn't take 360, if you go through those videos, that's what I'm going to do is anytime he brings up stuff, I kind of note it. But we talked a lot about this that first time.
Yep.
Like a lot.
And you could even do, like, if you didn't want to define all these technically, I believe this would work. You could do a 4K comma V in data dot items, right? That would take in our dictionary, and then we could say self dot K equals B. And then we would just have to know that this would be something like state blah, blah, blah. So if I tried this, and I'm totally making this up on the fly, by the way, but that should be the way that works. So we want our result, and we're going to say my result, and we're going to create an instance of our object. Looks exactly like that. And then down here, I could just say print my result dot report date, for example. And if that works, what did I forget? Nope, that's not supposed to be that. That's a colon. Fat finger. And that's supposed to be a colon. And yeah, it's because it's not there. That's fine. What?
Because
You had self dot K. What's self in there?
Oh, you're right. Sorry. You can tell it's been a little bit over the summer. Wow, that's not what I wanted. Go away. Oh no.
Oh, how did you do that?
Undo.
But your data is also beneath it, by the way. Your data equals response to JSON.
Yeah, I shouldn't have been using.
So that's
So
why
it should have been passing it. Oh, that's why. Okay. We could say some result. I don't know. Shouldn't matter. Shouldn't matter. Why is this? What am I missing here? Wow, I am blinky. See, even the professor will blink from time to time. It's okay. Result self.
Here's the syntax issue somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. What am I?
Actual logic.
hit the AI button. That'll fix it.
Wow, I cannot believe I am. You know what? Fine. I don't remember. Go back to the documentation. Even I'm not afraid to go back and figure out what I was doing wrong there. Let's go back here. That would be our, not that one, this one here. Can't believe I'm having problems defining a OOP here. I don't know. Go away. They make you create an account now? Wow. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to go the new way. Okay, you got automate the boring stuff, and then he has the second version of this book, which I know will pop up right here. And of that, you should have his other book. Where's the other book? I actually point to this in the other class. I no longer point you to this real Python link. Wow, this is going to be a great video for the YouTubes. I laugh because I've been coding in Python all summer long and I'm just trying to blank. It's been one of those days. Come on.
It's like when I play video games forever, and all of a sudden, I'm like, how do I punch?
So rough. There we go. See, back to the documentation. Okay. So what am I missing that I feel horrible? Oh, there's an init. That's what I'm missing. Okay, that would pull in that variable if we're gonna call it the class. So we would do this on our end. Okay. That is, you're right. It was definitely a syntax error, and now I see what I'm doing wrong. I wish I could make this go away. I don't know what I did there. So instead of that, we would do something like this, right? And we wouldn't have this class. It's just going to be a class. And we would say that when we initialize this, that is when we are passing in some result, right? And then some result, we could ignore all of this because this will be on the inside of that. And we just take this and tab. And look how everything pretty cleans up and it's nice and pretty. This would just become some result. So what this little init's going to do, again, is it's going to iterate through each one of those and then set those as variables so we don't have to do it by hand. And now what? My result, right? My result. So result has no attribute. Yeah, it might actually not like this. I wondered about that. Well, we could at least test this part, right? So self dot we want this in a loop. We would do something like this would be some result. Report date. And report date. There you go. So we got our report date back out of there. So I was trying to be a little fancy and do it where it would automate it. You can probably do that, but you would have to get the syntax just right for that to work. Otherwise, you could just do that. You could set up report date. You can grab all the extra information you wanted out of your result to print that out. If you have a lot and you're going to be doing that repetitively, I encourage you to use an object for that because it's much easier to do things with an object than hand coding out line by line what these variables are for each one of those. All right. Anybody have any questions on that front? Wish I knew.
Yeah, Jason, when you're trying to troubleshoot like that, do you recommend like just commenting out the code that you want to take out of the equation?
Yes.
Or because it looked like you were deleting most of it. And I'm assuming that's just because you know what you're doing. But just commenting out like you would do in anything else in the IT industry, right? That's what you would recommend.
Yep. You just comment, just like you said, within a bash script or something. You would just comment it out, let it skip over it, or take out the chunks till you find the little piece that's having issues.
Okay.
The good thing is with Python, usually down here, if it errors, it's going to give you a line number that it errored off of. And that's where you could kind of drill into what is going on each one of these. So a lot of this is play, right? That's the beauty. If you come out here and find something like PyBaseball, all the headache of you setting up your own objects and working with all that, that's all done for you. I don't know where my PyBaseball went, but
You closed it
I did. Nice.
in your rage.
That one, right?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of pip install is somebody already wrote this code to do that. And if we actually looked in their code, like this one here, come on, you can see that they did this. So if it said from, for example, that it was like from PyBaseball import blah, right? So if we look at their init, it's going to automatically set player ID lookups and it sets up all these functions that is dealing with all of that data that you were trying to call individually. So like team batting, okay, that's an entire script that has the functions for the team batting reference. It's automatically going to calculate the way you want it, et cetera. You would be building this stuff from scratch if all you had was a REST API. If what XYZ vendor offers a Python one, somebody did all this hard work for you.
So look for that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can find a pip install of whatever you're trying to do, it's going to save you a lot of time. But at the end of the day, you may need to be able to consume something straight off a REST and just call it out. So for example, if you want government database type stuff,
Yeah.
they're going to have you just get the raw deal and you have to do it. If somebody's been fortunate enough to write it for you, by all means, use their code to do that. Just may want to inspect their code to make sure they're not asking for social security numbers and pulling, they can do whatever they want because you're using their package. Which is why I would encourage you to use pip install packages. Notice how PyBaseball, I could technically check out this GitHub and use it, right? If I pip install, well, then it's gone through the Python installer and they've at least somewhat vetted it. May not be perfect, but it's somewhat vetted. Hopefully that all made sense and I didn't just lose everybody again on Thursday too.
Well, I'm gonna rewatch the videos.
Was there anybody else that had an API? I know we bounced around there. And so again, all I'm looking for you to do this week, there is no homework, there is no any of that stuff. I just want you guys to get familiar with playing with some APIs. So whether you do the REST request portion of this, using request and pulling it out, or you go out and say, no, I want to use PyBaseball one, I just do pip install. In which case in this project, I would take that line, come down here, click on my terminal, and do a pip install. Again, make sure I'm in my virtual environment. It installs all the packages necessary. You'll notice it's a lot more packages than just PyBaseball, right? Because it looks like it's requiring, my goodness, a lot. Even NumPy, SciPy, cryptography, a lot that it's trying to pull back out of there. Matplotlib, which we'll play with. It's probably pulling pandas down. Beautiful soup I saw in there. So there's pandas right there it's installing. All of this is stuff that we're going to be playing with here, not next week, but the week right after that. Wow. So lots of packages in there. Now we go back and read how to use it. Okay, we're not doing this. We're going to come down here to documentation. We can run something like this, and we should get a result. And by the way, this stuff here, if you guys remember, this is you using straight on the Python console where you're not running a script, you're just live on a Python console. You can also do that kind of stuff down here in the terminal. So you can do it a couple different ways where you could just do a run and you could create just a new console right there. And so now I'm at the Python console. And so I could do something like from PyBaseball, import, whatever that was, statcast. And it looked like it took. And then we could come down here and just do a call for statscast. Come on, like this. And we can see it's doing a really large query to pull all that information back. We should get it. Normally you would never see something like this. This must be, well, it is. It's baked into the PyBaseball package to get that. And you can see here that it returned a bunch of results out. Anytime you see this ... in here, that means there's a whole lot of data on the inside of there. If you need to pull that out, then you expand. This is a pandas data frame here. This is not JSON, right? So we're used to dealing with JSON. This is going to be a pandas data frame that it's pulling out. We won't learn more about data frames until 2 weeks from now, but we will play with it. But again, look how it's organizing the data. It's putting it into pandas so that you have these nice little tables and charts, which is what pandas is great for. Think of pandas as a coding way of doing Excel. It's going to put it in rows and tables and charts and everything else so that you can tell Python, I want this out of there. Or you can ship it out and do even you'll learn this in the Panda section, .pdf, it'll create a PDF. Or .matplotlib, we can send that data off and actually graph everything that we're wanting to get out of there. So pretty cool, all the stuff that you can do with pandas. Now, this is again in the console. You write a script up here. You do the same thing. You just have to run the script in order to test it. How's everybody feeling about APIs?
I need to watch the videos again.
Watch videos and play with it. I can't train you on an API more than you sitting there tickling the keyboard, because you're going to fat finger things. You're going to mess something up just like you watched me do. You have to go through the process of doing it yourself.
Let's. I'm gonna walk through what you did.
Which one's in there?
And that way I can be like, okay, because that way I can go to find a different one and start putting my own things.
Yeah, I mean, and this whole class, it's no different than 360, right? You don't have to love coding, but you love something in your life. I don't care if it's gathering the magic or magic to gather, whatever it's called. Like, if that's your thing, cool. Because do your project over that. And the reason I say that is you're going to be excited and motivated to figure out the answer, right? So don't pick something that bores you, because you're going to have no desire to go do that code. Now, if you have something in your daily life that you really want to go chase, then you're going to be excited about that. And that's usually the way I get people to move through on assignments. You got to have some thing in your life that you like. And if you struggle when we get down towards the final project or a theme that you have in the middle of all this, we should probably figure that out earlier than later, so we can meet, we can have that discussion, help you brainstorm, etc. I've had guys come in here where they were just avid gamers, and so we did projects like this where we pulled from the Steam API and we built out websites that pulled all the statistics that they've ever played on their Steam accounts and displayed that as a website by the end of it. It was great because it was relevant to everybody that was in the class, and it was easy enough to pull that kind of stuff out. Find something that's your niche. You mentioned the food and the food. Like, I've had lots of baseball players come in here, right? They have nothing against baseball players, but they had no desire to learn Python code until we showed them that they could crunch the statistics like we were just doing out of the MLB and stuff. Then they went and found a way to go get the data of everything here at Fort Hays, the baseball team they played on, and they could write apps that would give them daily or weekly reports of how they did. Like, make it relevant to you, and you will want to chase what's going on. And because you guys are using GitHub and such, I can check out your code. So if you're struggling with it, I can check it out and play it and test it. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you, do you plan on uploading this video today, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as immediately after we hit stop, I'm going to upload it.
Thank you.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I think I had this other one. Did I get it uploaded? We just talked about that again.
Yeah, the other one you got uploaded, I saw it.
Okay, let me